Command Point is sponsored by Crossfire Games. Use code CommandPoint25 at checkout to get 5% off your next purchase. Link in the description.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Command Point. Today is the 7th day of Kill Team, which is extremely fitting for the faction that we're talking about today. I'm joined by Matt Opperman from the World Championships, who made top 16 with none other than Plague Marines. And Matt, how's it going?
It's going very well. Good seventh day of Kill Team to you. I'm sure we were all happy to celebrate our third day and now our seventh day, the two important Nurgle numbers. But I'm doing
Yeah.
well. I'm doing well.
I'm glad to hear that. You had some pretty nice success there at the World Championships, running Plague Marines, taking them out of the group stage and into the top cut, which is very impressive, especially considering the team came out very close to the cut of like a roster or like faction submission. So you didn't have a lot of time to you didn't exactly get the chance to master the team. You just saw them, they clicked with you, you picked them, and you ended up doing pretty well.
Couldn't have said it better myself. I think I got as far as I did with a lot of luck as well. There were a lot of really good Plague Marine players there that all deserve their accolades as well. But I think the team just made the Worlds cutoff by one day.
Yep.
If they had come out one day later, then they wouldn't have made it. So it was kind of a slapdash rush to get everything all painted up and figure out as many workable strategies as possible before the big day.
Yeah, and I mean, ended up going pretty well for you. So I guess I wanted to. So first, let's go from the perspective of somebody that is looking at getting into Kill Team, or maybe they are already into Kill Team and they're picking a new faction, and Plague Marines caught their eye. So for you, as somebody that's been playing them, that is a Nurgle enjoyer, what would you describe as like the draw to this team for you? Whether it's just an aesthetic thing or a playstyle thing or some mixture of those.
Yeah, I personally really like the Nurgle aesthetic. I just think Plague Marines are neat. But even if you don't, the team has a lot of appeal to it. Despite appearances, I think they're pretty straightforward to pick up. They're also relatively forgiving in that you feel all the damage that comes through. Like you realize when you've made mistakes, but you don't necessarily get punished for them as hard. So those are like helpful things with the team to learn them as quickly as possible. But what I really like about them is they are a very like stubborn team. They grab onto a point and they sit there and just like white knuckle hold it as long as they can. Or my personal favorite strategy is hucking 4 to 5 Plague Marines at my opponent's home objective and just saying, no, 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 you deployed on the wrong side. This is my home objective now. And just maxing, or trying to, as much as possible, max something like storm objectives or take ground on their side of the field. So it is a team for very hard-headed individuals, which I certainly am.
Well, that's perfect. That's a very good description, I would say. So, I know for a fact you have at least 10 games on the team because you took them to Worlds. So you have enough reps in the team that I feel like you could probably give me a good answer on this one. So, what is like something like a light bulb moment that clicked for you after a few games in that would be a good piece of advice to somebody picking up the team for the first time and playing them? That was like, maybe it took a few games for it to click for you, but once it did, it was like, wow, I wish I was doing this from the start. That just like a kind of a level up piece of advice for somebody coming in.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I'd recommend is that it's a 4 turning point game. I think there are a lot of teams that really want to explode on TP2, but especially playing Plague Marines, for better or worse, a lot of opponents will assume you're running Contain, and somewhere around TP2 will just start slingshotting big models onto your side of the field. And whether you are or aren't running Contain, you can kind of leverage all the slow movement that you have and not put yourself in bad positions by trying to like move and dash and shoot somebody. You can kind of just hang back and wait for them to come at you. And that's when I realized like I can just sit on the midline. I can maybe cap the middle objective and otherwise just wait for them to run at me. It made a lot of things click into place, and it made it easier to manage just how slow they can move, and allows you to sort of tap into the Death Guard mindset of like, no, I'm hunkering down here. This is my spot, and lets you sort of live that out as well. So that would be my chief piece of advice is don't play for turning point two, play for like turning point three or turning point four, and let your opponent burn out what they have, trying to run into your contagion or trying to shoot into your flies, and let them exhaust what they have before you start punching back.
Really nice. Yeah, I like that. Somebody that I've talked to quite a bit told me early on that they view Turning Point 2 as like the new Turning Point 1 from last edition. And once I started thinking about it that way, it like I felt like certain gears started clicking for me. And I think Plague Marines can really subscribe to that theory a little bit.
Yeah, very much so. I think, especially coming from the old edition where like Turning Point 1 used to be, you know, can you manage to score 2 points and then maybe you can win it later on? Uh, it really sort of dictated the pace of who has the pressure and who has the tempo for the game. But now that Turning Point 1 is mostly for staging, it allows elite teams and especially slow teams basically a full turn to just stay on conceal, move and dash wherever it is that they're going, and then be ready. They don't need to move and dash and then cap a point and then run out of APL to like also try to shoot a charging melt gunner or what have you.
And I mean, come to think of it, now that I'm thinking about it, man, Plague Marines would have hated last edition approved ops. It would have been horrible.
It would have been very tough.
Yeah.
Last edition, I played a lot of Chaos Demons, and I really loved the 12 Plague Bearer strategy. But boy howdy, if you didn't take the Scout Dash option and basically just throw an Icon Bearer onto a midline point, you lose the game immediately. So yeah, having a little more breathing room to set up is definitely good for these slow fellas.
For sure, for sure. So this is kind of an interesting one to talk about, this next question, because Plague Marines only have 7 operatives to choose from. So the operative selection isn't like a super complicated thing, but everybody that I've talked to seems to have different opinions on what to leave home and when to take certain guys and you know that decision making process. So when it comes to choosing your models each game, like who do you like to take and who do you like to leave, and what comes into that decision?
Yeah, I think you're right that everybody has strong opinions on what the like objectively right answer is. I think everybody will agree that you take the leader because you literally have to. You take the plague caster because that's effectively a second leader, and you take the icon bearer. You always take those three, no exceptions. Beyond that, I always take the bombardier. There are very few situations in which I don't. And then from there, it's a little more flexible. I think conventional wisdom is from there, you would normally take the warrior and then either the heavy gunner or the flail to taste. I actually, based on the way I play them, I don't like taking the warrior very much, which I think is my own little personal imprint on it. I don't think he's bad. I think he just doesn't do what I want him to do. So oftentimes I will either leave the flail or the warrior at home. And then everybody else feels pretty indispensable to the game plan.
Okay, so you like the gunner then?
Yes, I love the heavy gunner, or I guess he is just a gunner. But I like him a lot. I think that he works really well into a lot of different teams. And also, this is a team that really likes to not just move, but move dash, which in my mind means that you want to get as much value out of a single shoot action as possible, which makes me a little skeptical about the bolters. So my bombardier is probably going to move dash and throw a crack. My icon bearer is probably going to move and dash and shoot one time. If it's between a warrior moving, dashing, and shooting, or a gunner moving, dashing, and shooting, I like the gunner just about every time.
Perfect. Yeah, and I mean those. I know firsthand in my games against Plague Marines, the bombardier, even with the blight grenades, those things can be vicious if you get a blast off.
Absolutely. Yeah. I had a match at Worlds against Commandos. Excellent Commandos player. Had me on the ropes basically the entire game. and I think we were coming around the bend to like TP3 or something like that. And he finally used his shush to stage a bunch of orcs around a door. Uh, and then I won initiative, thankfully, opened the door and blight grenaded, I think it was three commandos. It might have been four commandos. And I outright, if I remember right, I outright killed one of them. One of them got to one wound, which means he died to poison. And then the other one was like a two wound or something left over. And it wildly swung the grenade, or wildly swung the game with one grenade. So don't count them out. The blight grenades can really put some work in, especially against targets with a worse save characteristic.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So next thing I wanted to touch on. So I believe they have access to security, and is it seek and destroy is the other one?
Yes, that's correct.
So how do you like to typically load out with your tac op choice? Is there something that you prefer more the time, or are you kind of jumping between a few? Like what's your go tos?
I think I am a real glutton for a specific kind of play style. So I'm going to start with conventional wisdom, which is run contain, put a barbed wire on the midline, put light barricades on the midline, and just hunker down, and just kind of try to outgrind your opponent. I think that is the like responsible adult thing to do is to do that. If you don't want to do that, if you're a madman, you do what I do, which is you take either storm objectives in Seek and Destroy, or if the map is good for it, you do take ground. And you basically take either a warrior, a flail, or an icon bearer and plant them all by their lonesome on your home objective. And then you throw 4 to 5 Marines down at your opponent's home objective. Ideally scoring take ground along the way. And if you decide to go for storm objectives instead, uh, if you try to take the midline objective, there are a bunch of other conditions that you have to hit, which puts a little bit of agency in your opponent's hands, which I'm not super into. But if it's your opponent's home objective, you can just stand on it.
Yeah.
And if you have 4 to 5 Plague Marines that are just standing on an objective, they might shoot you with a Melta and they'll kill a Marine. And then you kill the Melta, and they might shoot you with a Plasma and they'll kill a Marine, and then you kill the Plasma. And you still have like 2, maybe 3 Plague Marines that are standing on their home objective, and they're fresh out of ways to kill Plague Marines. And you can do pretty well that way. You can do pretty well with that as well if they look across the table, they look at their security tac ops, and they think, oh, sure, Plague Marines, they're the slow guys. I'll take contain, and they're never going to try to get on my side of the field anyways. And then you can just run at them and full deny contain that way as well. So it has an advantage of both scoring well for you as well as stopping your opponent from scoring well, or at least putting a lot of pressure on them, which I've had a lot of success with. I'm not sure if that is like capital T, capital B, the best way to play the team, but it's a way that I like to play them quite a lot.
Nice. I like that. No, I mean it's cool to hear a little storm objectives love. Honestly, I've always been kind of fond of that tac op since I first saw it, and if you can get onto that back objective, it's kind of free money at that point.
Yeah, and that is a big if. If your opponent sees
Yeah.
it coming and they have the tools to plot down some barbed wires and some mines or whatever else their team might uniquely have, it can be a doozy. But if you can get there, it feels great.
Yeah, for sure. So what I wanted to touch on was next. So like, how do you? And you kind of went over this a little bit when describing your tac ops, but what is your kind of conventional early game strategy? Like, not necessarily just turn one, but the turn one, early turn two, kind of like, what are you setting up and staging, and what are you looking to accomplish with like your early game positioning?
Yeah, I think that it really depends on which of those two routes you're going to go. If it's the contain strategy, what you're trying to do is basically just stage everybody up, ideally behind heavy cover, and you're just trying not to lose a Marine. That part is still roughly the same. If you want to be doing something cheeky on Into the Dark, and like put a Marine on engage, on guard in Cloud of Flies, then bully for you. But mostly you're just trying to set up and be safe. And then turning point 2 is when you just sort of start grinding it out. You ideally, if you don't have a threat and you don't feel like you're going to, just pass with the operative. Don't give people things to fire at. Um, but if you're doing the more aggressive, run down their side of the field kind of line, you basically want to be staging all of your guys in a clump so that the cloud of flies can affect everybody. And then you're trying to find different ways for your malignant plague caster to either be close to things to heal in case they do take chip damage from a stray mind burn or some other sort of like seek shenanigans, or trying to poison people with the plague caster's abilities as well. If you can do those two things, then you've set up well. But mainly, you're just trying to spend most of the first half of the game getting shot as little as possible.
Perfect. Yeah, I mean that makes a lot of sense to me. All right, so the next question I wanted to. So I've been asking everybody their flashiest, coolest play they could think of with their team. I don't think Plague Marines is a very flashy team, but it's cool to still hear what people come up with all their teams. So I mean, in your mind, Matt, what is the coolest play you've ever pulled off with Plague Marines?
I've got maybe two that I
Okay.
feel particularly proud of. The first is kind of just thinking through how these numbers line up, and the surreal pleasure that comes from putting a bunch of models on one wound while poisoned and having them die on their own activation. Um, but just starting to math out like, okay, if I throw a blight grenade, I'm probably going to do 6 damage, which will leave a guardsman at 1 wound. So blight grenades and guardsmen. Bolters will do the same. Uh, but if I'm into 8 wound models like Kasserkin or Elves, if I hit them with a normal and a crit, that'll do 7 damage, and then they'll die on 1 wound. So I want to take poison bolters into those. Plague Spewer from the Heavy Gunner does the same thing into 10 wound models, and on and on. So finding different ways to just like set your opponent up so that they have ideally a couple in a row activations where they activate and die, and then you get to counteract and either like charge into somebody or tap a point or close a door or whatever it is you need to do. Gives you a lot of. It feels like almost like group activating Plague Marines after a while. And the run up to Worlds, I was practicing with a good friend of mine who's playing Inquisition, and I think I tagged maybe 3 of his models uh, down to 1 wound.
That's got to
And
feel good.
I was out of activations. He's like, all right, so all I have is these 3 guys left. I'm just going to activate them. And he just starts picking them up. It's like, no, 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 don't pick those up. You activate them and they die, and that's my turn again. And just to see the look on his face as it dawned on him, it's like, oh no, you get to shoot again. It's like, yeah, I get to shoot again now. Um, and he had like a gun servitor all lined up. Oh, beautiful. I'm going to ride that high for years, I think.
Yeah, and I mean they still have
Um,
to activate, which means you like still get you're not losing counteracts, but they're losing models. It's just like perfect.
Exactly. And especially with an otherwise slow team, those counteracts are just shimmying up every 2 inches, or 2 inches or so. That adds up. It can put you
Yeah.
into charge range when somebody is set up 8.1 inches away from you or what have you. So it's helpful stuff. Um, the other one that I'm particularly enamored with is putting a barbed wire dead on the center of an objective marker, particularly into the dark, and it stops an opponent from putting equipment or terrain on that objective marker, and then putting a portable barricade 2 inches away from it, then putting one of your Plague Marines into the portable barricade, having them jump onto the point, and all of a sudden you have a point that only you can have cover on, and then you can have them just like throw a smoke grenade or a cloud of flies on top of them, and they're effectively unkillable at that point unless they want to run at you and get into contagion range. So you
Wow.
can
Yeah.
really sort of dictate the pace of the game with some clever use of equipment as well.
I've never thought about doing that. The portable barricade to run up next to the barbed wire, and you just can't ever hit them. That's funny. All right, Matt, we're on the last question here, maybe the most important question. So I'm not going to ask you what your favorite Christmas movie is or your favorite Christmas song that was past years. Instead, I want you to tell me your favorite. It can be a drink, it can be a meal, it can be a treat, but if something that you enjoy, meal, treat, or drink on the holidays.
Oh man, there's so many. I mean, I'm sure people have said sugar cookies, which are just incredible.
I haven't gotten that one
Something.
actually.
Oh well, hey,
Somehow.
shout out sugar
Yeah.
cookies, the greatest. Um, I also, in my family, we make tarts for Christmas, just like basically just like tiny little pies with like jelly or preserves or whatever inside of them with the dusting of powdered sugar over top. Can't beat it. Uh, it's just a little bite of nostalgia for me already.
Love that. That's a first. I'm getting some interesting answers on this. This is always my favorite part of doing these is just getting like the little personal touches and seeing what stuff people like about Christmas. And
I'm
we're gonna
I'm
get some cool
excited
answers.
for like I'm excited for like the Command Point cookbook to come out. You just gotta
Yeah.
set all these up. Uh, I would be first in line to get it.
Oh, I got to throw that idea at Ryan and see what he can come up with as well. So Matt, thank you for joining us here on the 12 Days of Kill team. We appreciate you being here.
Absolutely, my pleasure being here.
Yep, and everybody watching, subscribe to Command Point if you aren't already, and tune in tomorrow for the 8th day of Kill Team. And I know yesterday I said it was the 5th day, even though it was the 6th day, so I'm clearly scatterbrained recording all these. But everybody just keep enjoying these videos and stay tuned for tomorrow. And happy holidays. Have a good night.